turn to the person next to you and tell them what you told somebody else about the class yesterday, because that was your assignment last night, right? You were going to tell somebody else about the class. So now I want you to tell the person next to you what you told them, okay? So you have to remember what you told them, you see? And so it's now second time round. So I just take a couple minutes and share with the person next to you what you told somebody else about the class yesterday, what you learned, what you remember. Okay. Can I really like the fact that everybody's talking. That is super. Because that meant either that you're giving many excuses for why you didn't do it, or you're actually sharing something important. I'll give you a hint. Now, there'll be a number of times today I'm going to ask you to talk to the person next to you and then share. But it's hard to get everybody's attention to stop. And if, it doesn't make sense to yell, "Be quiet," and you're doing the opposite of what you want. So I will just put up my hand. And when you see me with my hand up, I won't say anything. And you put up your hand, and you stop saying something. And pretty soon, everybody will have their hand up, and then we'll get going. And we'll see how quickly that spreads through the room. And it's something that you can use in your class. You have to practice it a bit. And one hint is everybody has to put their hand up. So if my hand's up and you see it, you don't just stop talking and poke the next guy. And don't put your hand up. You have to put your hand up so that nobody stops. Gets in the idea, well, it's not really important. I don't have to do that. Everybody does it. And it's just I found a very effective way in my classes just to get everybody quiet again without yelling at them. And then if you had a last sentence you had to say, well, you say it and then you put your hand up and then it's good. Okay? Well, where were we at? Yesterday, if you recall, let's see, get back to our place. We were talking about what education is, okay? Because if we're going to be discussing that and what we think about it and what Christ is supposed to do in it, we really need to know what education is. And we asked the question, is it preparing people for life or for a job? And I think at the end, there was some consensus that it was really for preparing people for life. At least it should be if we're at the Life Prep Academy, right? They put it up on the door, and if we want to argue, it's something else. But notice, part of life is preparing people for jobs. Because jobs are really an important part of life. And if we don't prepare them for a job, we really haven't prepared them for life. Students aren't kind of brains on a stick, and you just fill the brain and nothing else is really important. Everything is important. And we have to be sure that we're doing this, that we're preparing people for life. Now, the big question then is, what's life? What do you mean by life? And I do think it really has to do with vocation as well. But let's see if I can get back there. And there's many other things that could be included as well. But let's say, now, what difference does being a Christian make? This definition, I think, education is the process of preparing a person for life. Everybody could use that. I mean, that's not a bad kind of a definition. It's not a Christian definition. It's just kind of, that's what the word means. But, if you're a Christian, does it make any difference? Well, one of the things you have to think about is how long life is. What's the average lifespan of people in Nepal? How long do they live on average? 60, 65. 68 now, that's great. Well, I've never met anyone anywhere that isn't going to live forever. Now, we're not all going to spend forever here, but we are all going to live forever. And when we're preparing people for life, we better prepare them forever. Not just for 60, 70, 80, even 100 years. That's not good enough, because if we're going to prepare them for life, life is going to go on forever, and we better prepare them for that. And that makes a huge difference. Let me just quick run through this. You know, if you were a young child, today is all that you worry about. And if you can even remember yesterday, that's wonderful. Tomorrow is, distant future, because if you tell them you're going to have ice cream tomorrow, well, that's doesn't count. You get a little bit older and you go to primary school, and you may think a little bit about the past, preschool and what you did in kindergarten, but you're looking forward to going to high school, and you're looking ahead. And when you get to high school, you look back and you might have memories of primary school, and but you're looking ahead to university, and then you graduate and you go off to university, and education is often thought of as what's happened before. And so you're thinking about, high school, that was the good old days when I didn't have so much to do, and life was easy. But it's going to be wonderful when I finish and I have a career and I can get a job and make some money, and this will be what I look forward to. And then eventually you get a career. And you look back at education, right? You say, oh, yeah, that was when I finally finished all my education. Now I've got a job, I've got a career. And what do you look forward to? Retirement. Retirement. Yeah, we're going to retire. This is going to be wonderful. And then I won't have to work anymore. And this is great. And then what happens? Well, you retire. And you look back on the past and you think about your career and what you used to do and all that kind of thing. And what do you look forward to?
Journey.
What do you look forward to?
Preparing to go to heaven.
Pardon?
Play with the grandchildren.
Well, for a lot of the people, they are only looking forward to death. My parents have both gone to be with Jesus. But they lived in a home where a lot of old people were. And sometimes it can be really depressing to go with people. They've retired, and it doesn't matter whether you have lots of money or little money. If all you're looking forward to is death, it's pretty hard to get motivated to get up in the morning and make plans and do something and enjoy life. Because tomorrow we die could be quite literal. This is pretty short term. But as Christians, we have a whole different perspective. We're looking forward to forever. And so what we're doing today and what education is all about is preparation for eternal life. And this is really important to communicate to our students. Who is the wisest man that ever lived? Solomon. That was said he was the wisest man before Jesus came, because Jesus is actually the wisest man, but that's before him. But Solomon was really wise, but at the end of his life, he wrote a book, and in it, he said this: man's fate is like that of the animals. Same fate awaits them both. As one dies, so dies the other. All have the same breath. Man has no advantage over an animal. Everything is meaningless. All go to the same place. All come from dust, and to dust all return. And he continued and said, who knows if the spirit of man rises upward and if the spirit of the animal goes down into the earth. He lost an eternal perspective. And the whole book of Ecclesiastes says everything's meaningless. Doesn't make any sense. And if you have kids that are living with the idea that we're just like animals and this is the end, and evolution tells us that that's the way it is, everything will be meaningless. Like, why should I bother? It's not going to last very long. And so all this education stuff and whatever you're trying to communicate to them and you say, oh, this is so good, it really is meaningless unless we have a perspective beyond today and tomorrow and the career, and we say, oh, 70 years, that goes by real fast. 53 years goes by real fast. You know, you stand in front of the church and you think this is going, and all of a sudden it's gone. We have to be preparing for that. So the question I have for you, how do you develop an eternal perspective? How would that happen? I want you to do something, and this is what I call the think, pair, and then we'll share. Okay? You think, and then I'll say, okay, now you share with the person next to you. And then I'll put up my hand, and we'll all be quiet, and then we'll have a chance to share some ideas that you think would be helpful to do this. Now, if we don't do it, everything is meaningless. Is it easy? No. But what kind of ideas can we come up with together? Okay? Give you time to think about that first. How can we give an eternal perspective to our students? Okay, thank you. It works, you see. And now, how many have something to share with the rest of us? Did you come up with a good idea? Now, if you're come up with a good idea, be the first to volunteer so nobody else will take your good idea, right? So if you have a good idea, please volunteer. What did you come up with? Yes. What's your good idea?
Yeah, my idea is that we can develop an eternal perspective if we are obedient to the God and if we are with God.
Okay. How can you help the students have an eternal perspective?
I can help them by telling them about like how God works in their life, or like how we have to be, how we have to be kind, or how we can help each other. So I can teach them.
All right. What other ideas do we have? Somebody else. How many had the same kind of an idea? Oh, so you didn't have any idea. Okay, we have one over here.
Yeah, so she was saying, I can be the example, having a hope myself in Lord, so that the student can see in my life.
Okay. Being an example is really important. How do you have an eternal perspective? What difference does that make in your life? Well, let me just put down I'll give you a few hints of things that I thought about that you might do in the classroom. One, you talk about heaven and hell. Now, I've gone to church most of my life, and I don't remember very many messages about heaven. We don't even talk about it. We may say, well, we're going to be with Jesus, but we often don't really talk about what happens after we leave here. And if you don't talk about it and think about it, it's certainly not going to seem very important. And I watched my father, who preached almost every day at least once for 50 years. And at the end of his life, he had no real concept of what heaven was like. And he knew he was going there, but he really wasn't very anxious to go there because where am I going? He'd never thought about it very much. I think we need to study and think about where we're going to spend eternity and talk about it. You don't have to have all the answers, and the Bible doesn't tell us all the answers about everything. But if we know that we're going to go there, then we should be talking about it, thinking about it. That'd be one thing that we can do. That's a practical thing we can talk about. We can always be talking about the long-range effects of our choices. We tend to think, well, we'll make this choice, and this choice will make it better for me in the next moment. And that's why reason we lie. If we lie, we figure then I won't get I'll avoid some kind of problem right now, even though the chances are it'll be found out and then we'll have problems later on. But we need to always be talking about long-term consequences. It can be the long-term personal consequences, government, science. You make a choice, and it doesn't just affect today, it can affect tomorrow and the next day. There's a big popular film in the United States just right now. It's called Oppenheimer, and it's by the fellow that invented the atomic bomb. This was a big scientific thing, but people hadn't really grappled with what is the long-term consequences of doing this kind of thing. This could change everything for a very long period of time. But they didn't really think about it. They were thinking about a short-term effect. They didn't think about the long-term effect. But we need to get in the habit of doing that and looking at situations where there was good choices and bad choices, and just make sure we're not thinking like little children. Also, we can talk about people who have died. What does Hitler think about Jesus today? Well, he is really, the Bible says that every knee will bow and acknowledge that he's the Lord of all. Jesus the Jew is the Lord of the universe, and Hitler knows that today. He may be dead for 60 years, but he knows it today, and he's living with the consequences of the bad choices that he made. And it's the same with maybe the poor person that had so little, but they followed Jesus, and it seemed like their life was worthless, and it just ended so terribly, like the beggar and Lazarus. And that beggar, he's with Jesus, and it's good for him. I just was at the funeral of my brother-in-law, and it was a celebration of life because he'd had a stroke and he had all kinds of physical problems and everything else, but now we could celebrate he was with Jesus and all was good. And we don't have to sorrow like other people. We miss him, but it's good for him. We need to talk about that. And those are kinds of things will reinforce an eternal perspective. And one thing I also thought of, practically, you could draw a big diagram like my ray, right? You could paint this on the front wall of your classroom. And then you say, where are we today? Well, we're right up there. And where are we tomorrow? Well, we're just a little bit off from where we are today. And, 50 years from now, we'll just moved, you can't hardly notice it yet. But this is what we're preparing for. And then it makes a lot of things make sense that otherwise don't. And that might be just a few practical suggestions that might come in this business of getting an eternal perspective. So, what's education? I'll just mention just a couple more things. It's preparing for life. It's about people, not programs. And this is something that I have tried to do all the time when I meet new people. I say, I used to ask, what do you teach? And I've tried not to say that anymore. What should we say?
are you teaching?
Who are you teaching? Because what we teach, you don't teach mathematics. Mathematics can't learn anything. I mean, mathematics is mathematics. It can't learn anything. Physics can't learn anything. But children in the 3rd grade or in the 10th grade can learn about mathematics. Children can learn about language and literature. And so we teach people, not programs. And that's just a simple thing. You make a choice. And if you catch yourself asking, what do you teach? You say, sorry about that. Who do you teach? And then you can ask what they teach to those people. Okay? And then this is a process also of preparing people for life. But as a teacher, you can't live for them. You might like to help them make all the right choices. And you pour your life into them, and they may still make the wrong choices. Adam and Eve did, and they had God for their teacher. The disciples all forsook Jesus and fled. They had the perfect teacher as well. Some came back, but Judas never did. You see, we can't live for our students, and our success and our failure is not dependent on what our students do, but it's dependent on our faithfulness. And so you be there, prepare them well, and encourage them, but they have to make their own choices. And also just remember that this is a process. It's not a product. When you get a certificate at the end of this workshop or any time, that isn't getting an education. The process of developing and thinking and learning and using what you've got, that's the education. And it's not the product that you get at the end. So let's take this definition, if we all agreed about it. Christ in education is the process of preparing a person for life, that's all the same, in which all elements are related to Christ and being transformed by Him. Everything is being transformed by Him. Now, let's be more detailed. The teacher, the student, the content, the methodology, the philosophy, the objectives, the assessment, the environment are all connected to Christ and being transformed by Him. That's the kind of education Christ wants. And we're not very good at it. A couple of reasons. We haven't had much experience with it. We are like our teachers. When I went through elementary and high school, I don't know of having any Christian teacher. The principal of the elementary school was a Christian. My parents told me he was because they knew the church that he went to. But I tried to avoid spending time with the principal. So he didn't have much influence on my life. I had another teacher when I was in about grade 9 that was really influential in my life. We had a Christian club, and she loved us students, and she gave me advice about dating, and she, how to grow up and make good decisions. She was really influential, and I had contact with her until she died about 10 years ago. But I never had her in the classroom. I never saw her teach a class. And so I had no examples. And I had no instruction either. And so I think, well, 3 days come here, and what's that difference going to make? Maybe it'll make a little bit of difference to help you say, there is some possibilities I want to develop in Christ in education. I'm going to work towards that. And I may not be successful right away. And it won't be all that I want to be, or even Christ, but I'm going to move in that direction. Okay. There's some other definitions I want to take a look at today. And let's see if we can go here. So we talked about education, what it is, Christ in education, so you know what I'm thinking about. 4 other words. First one is worldview. And there's lots of, if you read any books about education and so many other books these days, they'll have definitions of worldview. This is mine. Worldview is how we view the world when we're not thinking about it. Okay? Now, we go through a lot of life without thinking about it. And so you might call it our autopilot or our controlling beliefs. They actually control a lot of what we do. I remember when I moved my office from one building to another across town. I got up in the morning and I started across town in the car. And all of a sudden I found myself at the wrong building because I was driving and watching the traffic and everything else, but I was going on autopilot. I hadn't thought about it. I just was going. And there's much of life that we operate on autopilot. And that is really our worldview. It's our autopilot. And if we react to a situation without thinking about it, well, let's see, I'm losing some things here. There. If something happens in your class and some kid decides to, say something stupid or doesn't do his homework or, something happens, we often react. We're not thinking about it. This kid's misbehaving, you go slap, or, there could be all kinds of things that we might do. I remember when I started teaching, there were some kids that misbehaved, and I had a meter stick, that I used in my science class, and I got mad and I whap right and broke the stick. It's you do stupid things because you're not thinking about it. But that's controlled by our worldview because we think if somebody's misbehaving, I have to do something to stop it. Now I'm going to do whatever. And that is developed by our experience. We saw teachers do that. We experienced it maybe ourselves, that the teacher responded that way to the things we were doing. And so that forms our worldview. We're not thinking about it, not planning it. It just happens. But there is another word that's really important, and that is our philosophy. Now, could you guess what the philosophy is? If the worldview is how you view the world when you're not thinking about it, what's the philosophy?
Thinking.
Yeah, how we view the world when we're thinking about it. Okay? And this is important, And that's one of the reasons thinking is so important, because now we're not just sort of a prisoner of what happened in the past or what we've experienced, but we're thinking, and this is helpful. The problem is we can't be thinking about everything all the time. If we had to think about everything, we'd have real difficulties. There's many things. If you go to, some guys have shoes with shoelaces. If you had to think about tying the shoelace all the time, you'd never get your shoes tied in the morning. You just do it in the dark, and you can do it without looking at your feet. You just do it automatically. But if you have to think about it all, it's a problem. At first, you have to think about it, and you can teach people to do it. You ever try to learn a new way to tie your shoes? I had a pair of shoes that wouldn't stay tied. And I went on the internet. That's where you go, right? When you have a problem, and I found a whole website that talked about ways to tie your shoe. It exists. And I found a way, they said, this will never undo. Okay. And so I tried to learn to tie my shoes a different way. And it was terrible. I had to spend time, I think, and I worked at it. But eventually I did figure out how to tie those shoes. But still, every time I tie it that way, I have to concentrate on tying my shoes. And that was just a simple little thing. But we're talking about trying to respond with Christ in the center of our education system. It's never happened to us before. We've never seen it done before. We have a good idea, and we're going to try to do it. And it doesn't happen automatically. So we have to develop and take our philosophy, the things we learned, and start to consciously put them into practice. And when you start to put them into practice, now that's going to influence your experience and your worldview. And your worldview starts to change by what you experience. Now, a lot of people as Christians, they say, oh, I need a change of my worldview. So they wait, or they go to seminars and they learn and they hear all kinds of instruction. And it only changes their philosophy, but it doesn't change their worldview. And so when it comes to making a decision and you're not thinking about it, they just make it the same old way they always used to make the decision. They do the same thing in the classroom the way they always did before, because they have actually not had a transformed worldview. Because worldviews change by experience. Philosophies change by instruction. And our choices change by thinking about them, reflection. This is why reflection is really important. But it's hard for us to reflect by ourselves. It's really helpful to have somebody else to reflect with. I'd like you to be thinking about, after this is over, someone that you're going to talk to and make them your helper, that you can share with what you're doing, what you're experiencing, what you're thinking, and you can encourage each other to continue to actually make changes. Not just hear about something and then go on and, well, we do it just like we did it before, but we actually put it into practice. But we need, we call it often a buddy system, where you go out and somebody else is going to say, did you do it? And then how did it go? And you say it was terrible, and it was, the kids didn't. I felt embarrassed, and it was a disaster. And they say, well, no, I think that was a good idea, but let's try it again, and I'll ask you about it tomorrow. And then he says, yeah, but what did you do? And then you can help each other in that process. But you need to identify somebody that you can do it. And I'd like you to do that before you leave, because if you wait till after you leave, you won't do it. You'll just kind of, forget about it. But if you can identify somebody and then you make that choice, make that commitment, then you can help each other in the process, okay? So that's a little bit of an assignment for you to think about. This thing doesn't like to be interrupted. I'll just mention this about culture. Culture is the way a group of people view the world. Now, you and I didn't get to choose our culture. You didn't get to choose where you were born, who your parents were, any of those kinds of things. Much of your culture you didn't get to have a choice about. But that's really important, the group of people that you grow up. That shapes your worldview. And so you're going to actually find that when you become a Christian, you've still been shaped by the people that you grew up with, the people around you. And that's one reason when you become a Christian, it's important to move into the body of Christ and meet with other Christians, because there's now a new group of people that have started to learn more about how to look at life from the way God does, and they'll influence you. And if you don't do that and you're by yourself, you're going to be influenced by the people that you are around, which are people that don't see life from God's perspective. And now, mention philosophy, the way we think about this. These are our professed beliefs. If somebody asks you, what do you think of children? What do you believe about them? You can give them all the right answers. These are people made in God's image and all kinds of things. But if you're thinking about it, they can change your responses to children in the classroom. But if you're not thinking, you just react. Now, come to biblical worldview. This is a word that we already mentioned yesterday. Here's my definition. Biblical worldview is God's revelation of how he views his world. So from my perspective and my definitions, you and I will never have a biblical worldview. We will have a personal worldview that may be more and more like the biblical worldview. God reveals what we need to know about how he views the world, and now we are in the process of aligning our worldview with his. And we begin to notice the differences between what God says about the world and how he views things and the way we do, and maybe the way the people around us do. And we say, oh, I need to change. And then we start to make changes. We begin to practice things. We do things differently. We don't just, like James says, we don't just hear something and do nothing. We hear it and we put it into practice. And this begins to reshape our worldview so that it becomes more and more like the biblical worldview. Okay. Now, let's see if we can get there. Worldview is shaped by experience, philosophy is shaped by instruction, choice is shaped by reflection. Okay. Now, just a quick word about double-mindedness. Our experience has shaped our worldview, and those beliefs that we don't even think about control a lot of what we do and our reactions. The instruction we have received, and today that's what we're doing, goes and changes our philosophy, which changes what we profess to believe. And we say, yeah, I believe that. That's good. And it can change and will change our responses if we let it. But very often these are now going in very different directions. And that's one reason that people often say of Christians they're hypocrites. Because they say, well, you don't do what you say, right? We profess a certain beliefs, but we're not doing them. Because our worldview is controlling, when we're not thinking about it, we just kind of go along. We're doing the things just the way we used to do it. And we need to bring these two into alignment. They need to get closer and closer together so that with time, they're getting to be more aligned and to what God says about his view of the world, and our view is going to start to move to be more and more like it. So if you don't do anything different, you don't try anything, you don't encourage anybody else to do anything different, this whole time is a waste of time. Because ultimately it just will affect it when somebody talks to you about it. You can give all the right answers and it won't change your school, your classroom. It won't change anybody else either. Because that worldview is so important and so embedded. It's much easier to change philosophy than worldview. That's it. Summary. Okay. Now, we talked about definitions. Now I want to talk a little bit more about purpose of education. We talked about what education is. Okay, now what is it supposed to do? If you were to tell your kids or ask your children in your classroom, what's the purpose of education, what would they say? If you're sending them off and you're advertising about your school, we're going to do this, and this is going to be wonderful, where are they headed? It's the question, why are you a teacher? I want you to think about that. And then we're going to do the think, pair, share. You're going to think, then we'll pair, and then we'll share. Okay? Why are you a teacher? Okay? I want you to think about a minute or two before you share. Put something down on paper. It's often helpful just to write it down because it kind of confirms what you're thinking about. Okay, now you can share what somebody else said to you. Okay, so you're not telling what did you hear about it? Why you be a teacher? Well, you must have heard something. I heard lots of discussion. So, why are people a teacher? Come on. Oh, you didn't hear what he said?
I heard.
You heard. What did he say?
So he said that teachers are like a mentor.
He wants to be a mentor.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Okay. Somebody else. What did he say? Yeah. He said the same thing. Oh, great minds think alike, they say. Yeah. Okay. Someone else.
She said
Yes?
she said she can inspire students for a better future.
Okay. That's great. She can inspire students for a better future. Somebody else. What did she say?
I love to teach. That's right.
She wants to teach. Okay. Good. Did you have something that you heard from her?
I think this is a God's gift.
Pardon me?
God's gift.
It's God's gift. Okay. Other responses. Okay. Let's go over here.
My partner, she said that it is her calling from God, and secondly, she is very caring and loving. Like she likes to care and love to the children.
Okay. If God calls you, you should do it. And if you don't love children, you shouldn't do it. We heard that yesterday, right? Okay, somebody here. You. What did she say?
She said she is a teacher because she loves children.
She loves children. Okay. Somebody else. Another answer. Come on. See if you look away and pretend I won't see you, then I actually notice. Okay. What did she say?
She said that she became a teacher because she loves kids. She loves teaching kids. That's why she said that she became a teacher. Or she
Okay.
is a teacher still, yeah.
Loving children is pretty popular, right? How many said something about loving children? Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of things about that. How do you know when you've been successful? Oh, there's somebody here.
I think there's quite different than she said she's a teacher because she wanted to do something different what's happening in education right now.
Oh, she wanted to do something different than what's happening in others right now.
Right now in the education system.
Okay. Well, that's a good reason as well. You're going to make a difference. All right. One of the questions is, how would you know that you were successful? You say, why are you a teacher? Well, I'm doing this because. But how do you know when you've done what you're supposed to do? You could love the kids, but what difference does it make? In a sense, how do you know what is it you're really trying to accomplish with them, and how would you know when you got there? This becomes an important kind of question. Now, I hadn't thought, just a minute. We were supposed to stop for a break. Okay, we're going to stop for a break and we're going to come back.